"Can you fix me?" she whispered, her voice trembling. "My mom says I'm broken because I can't read right." Wei knelt, his janitor's uniform crinkling as he lowered himself to her level. His face held a warmth the little girl had rarely seen so close. "You're not broken, little one," he said softly, his voice a steady hum that seemed to soften the cold stillness of the school hallway. "You just see the world in a special way." The little girl, May, stared at her worn sneakers, a tear sliding down her cheek. Her small body shook, a fragile leaf caught in the storm of her mother's disapproval. Just minutes ago, the principal's office door had burst open, slamming against the wall with a sound like thunder. Lin Zhao, a woman who dominated corporate boardrooms and crafted empires from perfect algorithms, had stormed out, her face a mask of icy rage. She didn't even glance at her daughter. Her phone was already at her ear, issuing commands, her sharp heels clicking a rhythm of impatience on the polished floor. Wei had been mopping at the hallway's far end, his movements slow and deliberate, the soft squeak of his cart a familiar comfort in the after-school quiet. He'd learned to blend into the background, but the raised voices from behind the principal's heavy wooden door had been impossible to ignore. Words like learning disability, dyslexia, and unacceptable cut through the air. And then Lin's voice, sharp as a blade, not an option. Now, the silence she left behind weighed heavier than the argument. May stood clutching a crumpled paper, staring at the empty space where her mother had been. She looked lost, abandoned. That's when she turned, saw Wei, and her desperate question spilled out. Wei's heart ached for her. He'd seen kids cry over small hurts, skinned knees, bad grades, but this was deeper, a wound that reached her soul, making her believe she was unlovable. He reached into his coveralls and pulled out a small, smooth stone he always carried, a plain gray river rock, polished by years of water and time. "Look at this," he said, placing it in her tiny palm. "It's not perfect. It's got scratches and marks, but that's what makes it unique. That's what makes it special." May closed her fingers around the stone, its coolness a small comfort against her warm skin. She looked from the stone to Wei's face, her eyes shimmering with fragile hope. "She's so mad," May whispered. "She said the letters are simple." Wei nodded slowly. He knew Lin Zhao's reputation, her relentless drive for perfection. He could picture the scene that had just unfolded in Principal Chen's office. It had begun an hour earlier. Lin sat across from Principal Chen and a child psychologist, Dr. Huang, her posture rigid, her tailored suit like armor. The office, usually a place of quiet authority, felt like a courtroom with May on trial. "As I was explaining, Ms. Zhao," Dr. Huang said, her tone patient but weary, "dyslexia isn't about intelligence. Many with dyslexia are exceptionally bright. It's a neurological difference in how the brain handles language. Letters can seem to shift or swap places." "A flaw, then," Lin cut in, her voice slicing through the explanation. "A glitch." Principal Chen shifted uncomfortably. "We don't use those terms, Ms. Zhao. It's a condition that needs a tailored approach, patience, specialized tools." Lin's laugh was sharp, humorless. "Patience? Tools? I built my company on flawless systems and zero errors. My daughter will not be the exception." She leaned forward, her gaze pinning the educators in place. "Stop excusing her. Letters on a page aren't that hard. Make her read them." Dr. Huang took a deep breath. "It's not that simple. Forcing her, punishing her for something she can't control, will only breed anxiety and shame. It could make things worse." "Worse?" Lin's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Worse is my daughter, a Zhao, being unable to read properly. Worse is her failing. That will not happen. I fund this school generously to ensure she gets the best education, not to hear she's incapable. Fix it." Dr. Huang met her gaze, sadness in her eyes. "You can't fix a person, Ms. Zhao. You can only support them." Those words had been the breaking point. Lin stood abruptly, her chair scraping the floor. "This meeting is over. If you can't solve this, I'll find someone who can." She stormed out, passing May without a glance. Back in the hallway, the echo of Lin's anger lingered. Wei watched May clutch the stone, her knuckles pale. "The letters aren't easy for everyone," he said gently. "Sometimes they dance around. You just have to find the rhythm they move to." A faint, shaky smile crossed May's lips. "Rhythm? Exactly," Wei said, his own smile warm and encouraging. "Everyone's got their own song inside them. You'll find yours." From the end of the hall, the school's front doors opened. A man in a dark suit, Lin's driver, stepped inside. His eyes found May and he gave a slight nod. It was time to go. May's smile faded, fear creeping back into her eyes. She looked at Wei, then down the long hallway toward the door. She slipped the stone into her pocket, as if guarding a secret treasure. "I have to go," she whispered. "I know," Wei said softly. He stood, his joints creaking faintly. "Be brave, okay?" Mei nodded, a small, jerky motion. She turned and walked toward the driver, her steps hesitant at first, then quickening until she was nearly running. She didn't look back. Wei watched until the heavy glass doors closed behind her. He stood there a long moment, the quiet settling around him like dust. The scent of Wei's lemon-scented cleaner mingled with the sharp, lingering perfume Lin Zhao had left behind. A heavy dread settled in his chest. He was just a janitor, his role was to stay unseen, to clean up messes, not to step into them. But as he glanced at the polished floor, he noticed something Mei had dropped. It was the crumpled paper she'd been clutching. Wei bent down and picked it up. It wasn't a test or homework, it was a drawing. In shaky, childlike lines, it showed a little girl standing on one side of a tall, thick wall. On the other side, a woman with a crown stood, her back turned. The simple, heartbreaking image spoke louder than words ever could. Wei carefully folded the drawing and slipped it into his shirt pocket. He knew he should toss it, forget what he'd seen and heard, but he couldn't. Mei's terrified, pleading eyes were etched into his mind. He'd told her she wasn't broken, but as he pushed his squeaking cart down the silent hallway, he feared a woman like Lin Zhao could shatter anything. And he, the invisible janitor, might be the only one who'd noticed the cracks forming. The rest of Wei's shift blurred by, his body moving through familiar tasks, the sweep of the mop, the hum of the buffer, the soft click of classroom locks. But his mind lingered in that hallway, replaying Mei's trembling voice. The folded drawing in his pocket felt heavier than the stone he'd given her, a small square carrying the weight of a child's world. When he clocked out, the sky was a deep, bruised purple. He drove his old pickup truck, its engine a comforting rumble, away from the pristine lawns of Beihai Preparatory Academy toward his side of town, where streetlights flickered and houses huddled close together. His small, tidy apartment smelled faintly of the noodle soup he'd cooked 2 nights ago. The space was quiet, too quiet since his wife, Ling, had passed 3 years ago. Wei walked into the living room, his eyes drawn to the photo on the mantel. Ling's smile was wide and warm, her eyes alive with a spark that had faded too soon. She stood in front of a classroom whiteboard covered in colorful letters and sketches. Ling had been a special education teacher for 25 years, working with children labeled as challenging or behind. They're not challenging, Wei, she'd say, her voice brimming with conviction. They're reading a book in a language no one else sees. Our job is to help them translate. Her bookshelf in the corner still held her collection of books on learning differences, their pages worn from years of study. Wei had absorbed so much from her, not just the terms, but the empathy, the patience, the belief that every mind was unique. He pulled Mei's drawing from his pocket and smoothed it out on the coffee table. The girl and the crowned woman, divided by a wall. He could almost hear Ling's voice, "Look at the wall, Wei. That's how she feels. Our job is to give her a door." He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. He wasn't a teacher, just a janitor trying to pay his bills and keep to himself. But Mei's pained face haunted him. Across town, in a penthouse that seemed to float above the city, there was no warmth. Lin Zhao's home was a study in stark perfection, white walls, polished chrome, glass surfaces without a smudge. It was less a home than a showcase, cold and silent, every object precisely placed. Mei sat at a large white table in a room meant to be a playroom but felt like a sterile lab. Her mother sat across from her, a tablet glowing in her hands. "We'll try again," Lin said, her voice flat, the same tone she used for underperforming executives. "This program is designed for rapid improvement. It's a simple matching game, Mei. Look at the letter. Pick the one that matches." On the screen, a large letter B appeared, with 4 options below, D, P, Q, B. To Mei, the letters were like friends in a quarrel, twisting and flipping away from each other. The B seemed to waver, its curves melting, its lines bending. She hesitantly tapped the D. A harsh buzz cut through the silence, and a red X flashed on the screen. Lin's jaw tightened, her cold disappointment sharper than any yell. "That's incorrect. Try again." Mei's hand shook. The letters danced mockingly before her eyes. Her mother's impatience pressed down on her, a suffocating weight. Tears blurred the screen. "I can't," she whispered. "That's not an acceptable answer," Lin said, her voice like frost. "A Zhao does not say, 'I can't.' A Zhao finds solutions. The solution is to focus. Look at the screen and choose the right letter." Mei squeezed her eyes shut, Wei's kind face flickering in her mind. "You just see the world differently." The thought was a faint spark of warmth in the icy room. She took a shaky breath, opened her eyes, and guessed again, tapping the P. The buzzer screeched louder. Lin swiped the tablet away. "Enough. We'll work until you get it right. All night if necessary." She stood and walked to the window, staring at the city's glittering lights. "Failure is not a word I tolerate. Not in my company, and not in my daughter." Later that night, long after the grueling study session had ended, May lay in her perfectly made bed in her impeccably tidy room. But she wasn't sleeping. In the soft glow of her nightlight, she knelt on the floor, a sketch pad open on her lap. She wasn't drawing dragons or fairies. With careful, deliberate strokes, she sketched a single gray stone, smooth and resting in the palm of a small hand. She added the tiny lines and dents Wei had pointed out, giving the simple rock a sense of character, of meaning. It was a thank you. It was a secret. It was a message in a bottle cast into a vast, perilous sea. The next afternoon at Beihai Preparatory Academy, Wei went about his duties. The school hummed with the energy of another day. He pushed his cart down the pristine hallways, his mind replaying his conversation with May. He felt like he was teetering on the edge of a precipice, knowing he should step back but drawn to peer over the edge. While emptying the trash in the second-floor art room, he saw it. Tucked deep in the bin, beneath crumpled paper towels but carefully placed atop clay scraps, was a folded piece of paper. It was her. It had to be. His heart gave a quiet thump. His calloused hand, rough from years of work, trembled as he reached in and pulled it out. He unfolded it. It was the drawing of the stone. He recognized it instantly, knowing with bone-deep certainty that May had left it for him. She'd found a way to speak to him, a secret language of pictures only they shared. A slow smile spread across his face. The little girl had courage, fighting in her own quiet way. He studied the care in each line. She was reaching out, sending a signal from her cold, sterile world. He folded the drawing and tucked it into his pocket beside the first one. For a moment, a wave of pure, simple warmth washed over him. He'd made a connection, offered a small kindness, and it had been returned. But the warmth quickly gave way to a familiar chill of dread. He glanced up and down the empty hallway. This was a dangerous game. Lin Zhao was a formidable woman, and she'd made it clear she viewed her daughter's struggles as a problem to be fixed with ruthless precision. She wouldn't tolerate interference, especially from a janitor paid to be invisible. Wei was now part of May's secret, an ally in her silent rebellion. As he pushed his cart toward the next classroom, he knew he faced a choice: ignore the drawings, discard them, and retreat to being a ghost in the halls, or answer her, send a message to let her know she wasn't alone. It was a choice between safety and compassion, between staying unseen and doing what he knew, what Ling would have known, was right. He didn't know what he'd do. For 2 days, Wei wrestled with the decision. Each time his cart passed the art room, he felt a tug, a responsibility he didn't want. Responding meant stepping into a family's private battle. Ignoring it felt like abandoning a drowning child. He kept hearing Ling's voice: "You can't just stand by, Wei. Not when you know how to help." On the 3rd day, he made his choice. That evening, after his shift, he didn't go home. He sat in his truck in the empty school parking lot, a cheap notepad and pencil on the steering wheel. He wasn't an artist, not like May, but Ling had always said intention mattered most. He thought of May's first drawing: the girl, the crowned woman, the wall. He drew a thick, solid wall, but in its center, he sketched a small arched door with a simple round knob. The lines were uneven, the perspective shaky, but the message was clear: there is a way through. The next day, his heart pounded as he approached the art room. It felt absurd, a grown man sneaking around like a nervous kid. He checked the hallway. It was empty. With a quick, furtive motion, he lifted the trash can lid and placed his folded drawing inside, tucking it under a clean paper towel to keep it safe. He closed the lid and walked away, his footsteps echoing loudly in the quiet hall. The message was sent. Now he could only wait. Lin Zhao was not a woman who waited. She acted. The reports from the new team of tutors she'd hired were discouraging: words like resistant, anxious, and significant processing delays. To Lin, these were just euphemisms for failure. She was on a conference call in her penthouse office, pacing before floor-to-ceiling windows. "I'm not paying you $400 an hour for delays," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "I'm paying for results. If your methods aren't working, they're flawed." "Ms. Zhao," the tutor on the line said, voice strained, "May's anxiety is the main barrier. The pressure she's under is making learning impossible. We need to create a low-stress environment." "A low-stress environment?" Lin scoffed. "The world isn't low-stress. She needs to be ready for it, not coddled. I'm coming to the school tomorrow to observe the classroom myself. I need to see what's going wrong with my own eyes." The tutor hesitated. "I strongly advise against that. Your presence will only increase her pressure." "Your advice is noted," Lin said, and ended the call. She wouldn't be told how to handle her own daughter. If her team was failing, she'd take charge herself, analyze the variables, and fix the system. It was what she did best. The next day, a wave of dread washed over May as she stepped into her classroom. Her teacher, a kind woman named Mrs. Li, had announced they'd have a special visitor. May knew it was her mother. The thought of Lynn sitting at the back, watching, judging, twisted her stomach into a tight knot. All morning, she could barely focus. The words in May's books wiggled and blurred, and the numbers in her math workbook seemed to shuffle when she wasn't looking. Her only refuge was art class, the last period of the day, a quiet haven in a turbulent storm. As she stepped into the room, her eyes were drawn to the trash can by the door. Had Wei seen her drawing? Had he understood? She waited until Mrs. Lee was busy helping another student mix paints. Heart racing, she approached the bin, pretending to toss a scrap of paper. She lifted the lid and saw it, a folded piece of notepad paper resting on top. Her fingers shook as she grabbed it, quickly tucking it into her jumper pocket before returning to her table. When she was sure no one was watching, she slid it out under the table and unfolded it. A door, a small, simple door in a big, dark wall. A wave of relief, so strong it nearly overwhelmed her, washed over May. He'd understood. He'd answered. Her messages weren't lost in the vast ocean, someone was catching them. A small, secret smile curved her lips, the first real smile she'd had all day. She glanced through the classroom's glass panel into the hallway. There was Wei, pushing his cart at the far end. He wasn't looking her way, but she felt his presence like a warm, protective shield. For a fleeting moment, he glanced toward the art room, their eyes meeting through the glass. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod before moving on, disappearing around the corner. It was enough. It was a promise. It was proof she wasn't alone. For the rest of art class, May drew with newfound confidence. She sketched a little girl holding a key, walking toward a small door in a towering wall. The fragile piece held. The next morning, Lin Zhao arrived at Beihai Preparatory Academy, looking less like a classroom visitor and more like a commander inspecting her ranks. Her tailored suit was sharp, her leather portfolio clutched tightly. Her presence drained the warmth from the air. Teachers stood straighter, their smiles tightening. Wei saw her from down the hall, perched on a ladder replacing a flickering fluorescent bulb. He froze, hands still on the fixture. She was here. The danger was no longer abstract, it was striding down the hallway, her heels clicking like a ticking bomb. He watched as Principal Chen greeted her and led her toward May's third-grade classroom. A cold knot twisted in his stomach. He'd started this secret exchange, this quiet rebellion of drawings and kindness. He'd given May a key, but he'd also put them both in the line of fire. As Lin vanished into the classroom, leaving a trail of tense silence, Wei knew their secret world had become a minefield. One misstep could trigger an explosion. The moment Lin Zhao entered the third-grade classroom, the atmosphere shifted. A nervous energy rippled through the space. Mrs. Lee's welcoming smile grew stiff. The children, who'd been chatting brightly, fell silent, their eyes wide as they studied the impeccably dressed woman, May's mother. Lin gave Mrs. Lee a curt, professional nod, ignoring the children. She declined the comfortable chair near the teacher's desk, choosing instead a small, hard seat in the back corner, more judge than participant. She opened her portfolio, clicked a sleek silver pen, and fixed her gaze on her daughter. May felt her mother's stare like a heavy weight pressing down on her. She shrank in her seat, wishing she could slip beneath her desk and vanish. She sensed her classmates' curious glances. They knew her mother was important, her name was on the school library, but they'd never seen her here, in their space. Her presence marked May, singling her out. The morning dragged on, each minute a quiet torment for May. During the reading lesson, Mrs. Lee, striving for normalcy, asked students to read a paragraph from a story about a brave warrior. When she called on May, panic surged through the girl. May, Mrs. Lee said gently, the next paragraph, please, starting with, the warrior approached. May stared at the book. The words, so orderly a moment ago, began their chaotic dance. The W in warrior seemed to unravel, the R sprouted a curve. The letters swam in a sea of white. From the back of the room, the click of her mother's pen pierced the silence, click, 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 each sound a mark against her. May stammered, her finger tracing a shaky line beneath the words, trying to anchor them. The W warrior, approached, she tripped over the word, her cheeks burning with shame. From the corner, Lin made a sharp, deliberate mark in her portfolio. The small gesture was a public verdict. Everyone noticed. May's voice caught, the rest of the words dissolving. All she could see was that clicking pen, that cold, unyielding stare. I don't know, she whispered, the words bitter on her tongue. She sank lower in her chair, head bowed, as Mrs. Lee, with a sympathetic glance, quickly called on another student. Wei was polishing the brass handles on the hallway display cases, his back to the classroom door, but he saw it all reflected in the glass. May's struggle, Mrs. Lee's pained expression, Lin's icy judgment. A surge of protective anger flared in him. Lin was treating her daughter's classroom like a corporate battlefield. He wanted to barge in, tell her to back off, give May room to breathe. But he gripped his polishing cloth until his knuckles whitened and forced himself to stay put. May didn't play at recess. She hid behind the big oak tree at the playground's edge, her sketch pad open. Her hands trembled, but she drew, a little girl in a classroom, overshadowed by a dark, looming figure at the back, clutching a sharp, pointed pen. Getting the drawing to weigh was a new challenge. With her mother at the school, the art room was too risky. Lin Zhao's observation didn't end with the bell. She had meetings with Principal Chen and the tutors, her presence a constant threat in the building. May waited until the halls were nearly empty, until she saw her mother deep in a heated discussion with Principal Chen. Heart pounding, she slipped down the hall to the art room, her sneakers silent on the polished floor. She shoved her drawing deep into the trash bin, hands shaking with fear. As she turned to leave, her breath caught. Lin stood at the hallway's end, watching her. May, what were you doing in there? Lin's eyes narrowed, sharp and calculating. Nothing, May squeaked. Just throwing something away. Lin's gaze flicked from May's flushed face to the art room door. She said nothing more, only gave a curt nod. Our car is waiting. But suspicion had taken root. That evening, after another grueling tutoring session at home, Lin's mind kept circling back to that moment. May's furtive movements, her panicked expression, it didn't add up. It was a glitch in the system, and Lin Zhao did not tolerate glitches. The next day, she returned to the school unannounced. She didn't go to the classroom. She headed straight for the art room. It was empty. She approached the trash can by the door. It felt absurd, a multimillionaire CEO digging through a school bin, but she was chasing a lead. At first, she found only crumpled papers and dried paint cloths. Then she saw it, tucked to the side, May's drawing of the girl and the shadow. As she examined it, another paper caught her eye, older, more worn. The stone. Then another, the wall with the door. And finally, a crude drawing, not in May's hand, of a simple door. The pieces snapped together with chilling clarity. Someone was communicating with her daughter, encouraging her perceived weakness, forming an alliance behind Lin's back. But who? A teacher? A student? Her eyes scanned the room, then landed on the trash can, the one place only one person touched. The janitor. Cold, absolute rage surged through her. The audacity of a man paid to scrub floors, daring to meddle in her family, undermining her authority, filling May's head with nonsense about being different. She found Wei in a quiet hallway on the lower level, scrubbing scuff marks from the baseboards. He looked up as her heels clicked closer, and the look on her face told him the game was over. Her voice was low, dripping with venom. You are paid to be invisible. If I see you near my daughter again, you'll be cleaning gutters for a living. At that moment, the door at the hall's end burst open. May came running, tears streaming down her face, her breath's ragged sobs. She'd just gotten another test back from Mrs. Li, covered in red ink. She shoved the paper at her mother. The letters move, she screamed, her voice raw with pain. They won't stay still. It's not my fault. Overwhelmed, her body shaking with frustration and grief, May turned and fled, her sobs echoing down the empty corridor. Lin stood frozen, the crumpled, red-marked paper in her hand. Her threat to Wei hung unfinished in the tense air. For a split second, her eyes flickered, not with anger, but with raw, stunned confusion. Wei watched, his heart heavy as stone. The secret was out. Their quiet war of drawings and kindness was over. The real battle was beginning. The echo of May's sobs faded, leaving a heavy silence in the hallway. Lin stood motionless, the test paper clutched tightly. For a moment, the unyielding CEO's mask slipped, revealing a flicker of bewildered shock. Then it hardened into blazing fury. She turned to Wei, her eyes cold fire. This, she said, her voice a taut wire of rage, is your fault. You filled her head with fantasies that she's different. You encouraged her to fail. Wei met her gaze. Fear knotted his stomach, but a quiet, stubborn anger rose within him. She's not failing, Ms. Zhao, he said steadily. She's hurting. There's a difference. Do not presume to tell me about my daughter, Lin snapped. She crushed the test paper into a tight ball, a gesture of violent dismissal. You are done here. Your interference ends now. She didn't fire him, that would be too messy. Instead, she made a clean, decisive cut, turning on her heel and striding down the hall, her purpose clear and terrifying. She wasn't just removing Wei from the equation, she was rewriting it entirely. An hour later, Principal Chen delivered the news, looking weary. She's pulling May from Beihai, Wei. Effective immediately. She's hired a private specialist for intensive, full-time remedial instruction. She's cutting May off from everything, her friends, Mrs. Li, everyone. Wei sighed. She's building a fortress around that little girl, and I don't think it's to keep the world out. I think it's to keep May in. The words struck him like a blow. His attempt to give May a small door in her wall had led to Lin Zhao sealing every window. A sickening wave of guilt washed over him. He had failed her. May's world shrank to the sterile white playroom in the penthouse. The new instructor, Ms. Huang, with her severe haircut and unyielding voice, was a disciple of the Lin Zhao method. There were no games, no warmth, only drills, repetition, and a digital timer that beeped coldly with every mistake May made. Her anxiety grew, a constant hum under her skin. She felt like a prisoner in her own home. She missed the lively chaos of school, Mrs. Li's warm smile, and, most of all, Wei. She felt abandoned. The spark of hope he'd given her flickered, threatening to die out. Weeks bled into a month. Wei went through the motions at work, the hallways of Beihai Preparatory Academy feeling emptier than ever. Passing the art room brought a pang of guilt. He had no way to know how May was, no way to reach her. He was a ghost again, and he hated it. One evening, as he hauled the last of the trash to the dumpsters, a sleek black car pulled up beside him. The back window slid down, and Lin's driver leaned out. "Your Wei, the janitor?" he asked, voice low and cautious. Wei tensed, gripping the trash bin handle. "That's me." The driver glanced around the empty lot, then reached into his jacket. "The little one," he whispered. "She told me. Said this was important." He handed Wei a folded piece of drawing paper. "Don't tell anyone you got this from me. I like my job." Wei's heart leapt. He took the paper, his rough fingers brushing the driver's gloved hand. "Thank you," he breathed. The car sped off, leaving him alone in the dim light. With trembling hands, he unfolded the drawing. The lines were frantic, dark, a small bird trapped in a tiny, cramped cage. On the cage door, where a lock should be, was a detailed sketch of Lin's face, cold and severe. Outside the cage, in the corner, was a small gray stone, distant and faint. It was a cry for help. Wei stared, a lump in his throat. This wasn't the end, it was a call to action. His quiet kindness had been swept aside. The situation demanded more. He was just a janitor, with no power, no wealth. What could he do against a woman like Lin Zhao? He didn't know, but standing in the growing darkness, he was certain of one thing: he would find a way. The fight wasn't over. Drawing on Ling's library of special education texts, Wei hunted for an authority even Lin would respect. He wasn't just reading, he was searching for a weapon. He found it in an old conference program, a speaker bio Ling had circled in red ink, Dr. Jian Kong, the country's foremost expert on childhood learning disorders. Ling's note in the margin read, "He speaks their language." Wei felt a surge of hope. This was the man. The next morning, reality hit hard. His call to Dr. Kang's research institute was met by a crisp receptionist. "You'll need a referral from a primary physician and a full diagnostic workup," she said, tone bored. When Wei pressed, she was firm. "Dr. Kong doesn't take personal calls. Submit a query through our website." The call ended with a polite click. The website was a dead end, a labyrinth of forms demanding credentials he lacked. As a janitor, his query would be ignored. The fortress wasn't just around May, it surrounded the very people who could help. Defeated, Wei nearly gave up. But then he looked at May's drawings on his table, the wall, the door, the caged bird. He couldn't stop here. He had to stop knocking on the front door and find a back entrance. Research at the public library gave him a new target. Dr. Kong was the closing speaker at an education summit at the city's largest luxury hotel in 2 days. Tickets cost over $1,000, but Wei didn't need a ticket. He knew buildings like that. On the conference morning, he wore his cleanest jeans and a plain blue work shirt, May's drawings tucked inside his jacket. He bypassed the hotel's grand entrance and headed for the loading dock. Amid the chaos of beeping trucks and shouting workers, he waited for the supervisor to look away, then slipped inside, a ghost gliding through a crack in the wall. He moved with quiet purpose through the hotel's service corridors, finding a staff bulletin board with the day's schedule, keynote address, Dr. Jian Kong, Grand Ballroom, 4 p.m. His target was the VIP green room nearby. He found a custodial closet close by and waited, the envelope heavy on his lap. At 10 minutes to 4, he left the closet and positioned himself outside the green room, pretending to inspect a scuff mark on the wall, invisible again. The speech ended with a thunderous ovation. Minutes later, the doors opened, and Dr. Kong emerged, surrounded by well-dressed organizers. This was Wei's chance. "Excuse me," an organizer said, frowning dismissively. "This is a private area." Wei ignored him, locking eyes with Dr. Kong. He pulled the drawings from the envelope. "Dr. Kong," he said, his voice steadier than he felt, "my wife was a teacher, Ling Chen. She said you were the only one who could translate this language." Dr. Kong paused. The name didn't register, but the word language did. His eyes fell on the first drawing, the girl and the wall. "Sir, Dr. Kong is on a very tight schedule," an organizer said, stepping between them. Wei didn't flinch. He held up the second drawing, the door. She said this is a cry for help. Then he showed the last, desperate image, the caged bird. And this means she's running out of time. He looked straight at Dr. Kong, his face raw with urgency. This little girl is being destroyed, and I'm the only one with the dictionary, but I don't know how to use it. The organizers tried to usher Dr. Kong away, muttering about security, but the doctor raised a hand, silencing them. His eyes were locked on the drawings, his brow furrowed in deep focus, his expert mind piecing together the story of pain on the crumpled pages. The wall, he murmured, studying the first drawing. Classic isolation and perceived parental rejection. He pointed to the second. The door, an external figure offering hope. His gaze settled on the caged bird. And regression. The hope has become a prison. The parental figure is now the lock. He looked at Wei, professional curiosity giving way to human concern. You said her name was Ling Chen? Wei swallowed, his throat tight. My wife. She passed. She was a teacher. She thought you were the best. Dr. Kang's expression softened. He gently took the drawings from Wei's hand. She was right, he said, referring to the drawings. This is a heartbreakingly clear narrative of psychological distress. He turned to his stunned assistant. Li, cancel my dinner engagement. Something more urgent has come up. To Wei, he said, walk with me. They found a quiet hotel cafe. Tell me everything, Dr. Kong said, his voice calm and open. From the beginning. For the next hour, Wei poured out the story, Lin Zhao's fury in Principal Chen's office, Mei's whispered plea to be fixed, their secret exchange of drawings, and the final desperate message delivered by the driver. He was brutally honest, detailing Lin's obsession with perfection and Mei's terrified withdrawal from the world. Dr. Kong listened without interrupting, hands folded on the table. When Wei finished, the doctor was silent, formulating a plan. You've done something extraordinary, Mr. Zhang, Dr. Kong said at last. You gave this child an emotional lifeline that may have kept her from breaking entirely. But the situation is unsustainable. Her mother has created a cycle of pressure and failure that's crushing her. What can we do? Wei asked, voice raw with desperation. She won't listen to me. She won't listen to anyone. Exactly, Dr. Kong said with a grim nod. Someone like Lin Zhao, a fortress built on perfection, can't be confronted directly. A frontal assault will only make her fortify the walls. She can't be told she's wrong, she has to reach that conclusion herself. He leaned forward, a glint of strategy in his eyes. Lin Zhao is a CEO. She speaks the language of efficiency and optimization. So we'll speak her language. He outlined the plan. His institute had a specialized corporate consulting division. I won't approach her as a child psychologist, Dr. Kong said. I'll approach her as a peer, a leader in my field, offering a consultation to discuss a neurocognitive framework for optimizing intellectual assets at her company. He gave a faint smile. It's jargon, her jargon. The goal is to get inside the fortress under a flag of truce. Mei won't be mentioned. Wei was stunned by the boldness of it, a Trojan horse strategy using Lin's ambition against her. What's my part? He asked. The hardest part, Dr. Kong said, his tone serious. You wait. You've carried this alone and delivered the message. Now trust me. He slid a business card across the table with his private cell number. You're not alone in this fight, Mr. Zhang. The next day, in her sterile penthouse office, Lin Zhao received an email from Dr. Jian Kang's institute. The subject line read, Consultation Proposal, Unlocking Cognitive Potential at Zhao Dynamics. Intrigued by the chance to boost her coder's efficiency, with no thought of her struggling daughter, she called her assistant. Clear my schedule for Friday morning. I'm meeting with Dr. Jian Kang. That evening, as Wei finished his shift, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, meeting set. Friday, 10 a.m. Phase 1 is a go. JK. Wei stared at the screen, a fragile hope flickering. A long shot balanced on a razor's edge. The janitor and the doctor, an unlikely alliance, fighting a quiet war for a child's soul. The first battle was about to begin. Friday morning, in her office on the 50th floor of Zhao Dynamics, Lin was in her element. The space was a throne room of glass and obsidian, overlooking the city. She respected power and intellect, and Dr. Kong had both. He was escorted in, looking more like a scholar than a scientist in his tweed jacket, a calm smile on his face, carrying an old leather briefcase. Dr. Kong, Lin said, extending a hand after brief pleasantries. My assistant said your proposal concerns cognitive optimization. A fascinating field. I'm eager to hear your pitch. Dr. Kong played his role flawlessly. He opened his briefcase and spoke her language, neuroplasticity in high-stress environments, overcoming cognitive bottlenecks in creative teams, maximizing the intellectual output of human capital. He painted a vision of a workforce not just efficient but transcendently brilliant. Lynn was captivated. "This is impressive, doctor," she said, her voice sharp with curiosity. "But it's theoretical. I'm a woman who believes in data. Show me a case study, proof of concept." This was the moment. The gate was open. "Of course," Dr. Kong said, his expression steady. "The most compelling case studies are often personal. Cognitive processing principles are universal, they apply to a brilliant software engineer or a developing child." He paused, letting the shift linger. "Consider a hypothetical case, a mind with extraordinary potential, a supercomputer, struggling with a simple processing error, say, with symbolic language, like reading." Lin Zhao's posture stiffened slightly, almost imperceptibly. Dr. Kong pressed on, his tone detached and academic. "The conventional approach labels this a disability, a defect. That's a flawed diagnosis. It's not a broken computer, it's a computer running a different, often more powerful operating system. If you run linear software on a machine that thinks in three-dimensional images, it crashes. The solution isn't to punish the machine, it's to write custom code." He reached into his briefcase. "I've developed a diagnostic model assessing cognitive and emotional states through nonverbal creative output. It's remarkable what a mind reveals without words. Let me show you an example from an anonymous case file." He laid May's drawings on the polished obsidian desk, the girl, the wall, the queen. Lynn stared, her breath catching. The style was unmistakably May's. "Here," Dr. Kong said, his voice a calm narration, "we see the subject's initial state, a barrier between the self and a perceived authority figure, profound isolation." He placed the second drawing, the door. "Here, an external variable appears, a potential ally, a flicker of hope. The system seeks a way through." Finally, he set down the caged bird. "And here," he said, his voice softening with sadness, "we see the result of intensified pressure. Hope becomes a prison. The authority figure is now the lock. The system is crashing." Lynn stared at the caged bird, at the cold, severe face, her own, drawn in May's unsteady hand. The sterile office air felt suffocating. This meeting, this pitch, was a deception. Her head snapped up, eyes blazing with fury and betrayal. "Where did you get these?" she demanded, her voice a harsh whisper. Dr. Kong met her gaze, unflinching, his tone shifting to that of a doctor delivering a hard truth. From a source more concerned with a child's well-being than corporate protocol. The truth hit her like a blow. She'd been outmaneuvered. This man had crafted an elaborate ruse to breach her defenses. Humiliation surged, white-hot. "This meeting is over," she said, standing abruptly. "Get out." "Lynn," Dr. Kong said, gentle but firm. "This isn't an attack. It's an intervention. Your daughter is screaming for help in the only language she has left, and you're the only one who can't hear her." At that moment, her desk's private line buzzed, a shrill sound slicing through the tension. Irritated, she jabbed the button. "What is it?" It was Ms. Huang, the tutor, her voice trembling with panic. "Ms. Zhao, you need to come home now." "I'm in a meeting," Lynn snapped. "It's May," Ms. Huang's voice broke. "She was in her room, and I stepped out for a moment, she's gone. I've searched the apartment. She's not here." The world collapsed. Fury, humiliation, corporate games, all vanished, replaced by a sharp, icy terror. Her perfectly controlled life wasn't cracking, it was imploding, and May was lost in the ruins. Dr. Kong stood, his face calm but concerned, watching the Empress as her fortress crumbled. For a long second, Lynn couldn't process, "May's gone." The words were a fatal error in her life's code. "That's impossible," she said into the phone, voice flat. "Check again." "I have," Ms. Huang wailed. "The service door security latch is unlocked. I think she—" Lynn slammed the phone down, her mind a storm. Fury at Dr. Kong was swallowed by primal fear. She grabbed her purse, movements jerky. "I have to go." Dr. Kong stood, steady as an anchor. "Lynn, think. Don't just react. Where would she go? Not where you think she should go, where would she feel safe?" The question stopped her cold. Safe? Her mind raced through approved locations, home, tutors, activities, but they felt empty. She had no idea where May felt safe because she'd never considered her daughter's feelings as relevant. She stared at Dr. Kong, the answer a void. I don't know." The admission cracked the core of her identity. Dr. Kong pulled out his phone. "I think I know someone who does." Wei was wiping down cafeteria tables when his phone rang. Dr. Kang's name flashed on the screen. "Wei, it's happened," the doctor said urgently. "May's run away. Lynn's looking in all the wrong places. I asked where May feels safe, and she had no answer. Do you?" The question hit Wei like a physical blow. A place where May felt safe, where someone spoke her language, where a kind man gave her a stone and a drawing of a door. There was only one answer. The school, Wei breathed. She's coming back to the school. He dropped his rag and ran, not waiting for permission, not thinking about his job. The empty hallways of Beihai Preparatory Academy became a frantic maze as Wei ran, his heart pounding. By the time Lin Zhao's car screeched to a halt out front, he was nearing the grand entrance hall. He pushed open the heavy double doors and froze. A small group of teachers stood just inside, hands over mouths in disbelief. Wei followed their gaze, and his heart stopped. The entrance hall was dominated by a massive floor-to-ceiling glass display case, a shrine Lin had donated to showcase her flawless academic history, perfect report cards, trophies, framed degrees. A monument to perfection. And Mei had defaced it. Across the pristine glass, in thick, chaotic strokes of black permanent marker, was a whirlwind of letters, backward, upside down, overlapping, swimming into each other in an illegible scrawl. It wasn't vandalism, it was a confession, a portrait of her mind. At the base of the case, huddled on the cold marble floor, was Mei, curled into a tight ball, the marker still clutched in her hand, as if the storm inside her had broken, leaving only wreckage. Lin swept into the hall, her frantic eyes landing on the crowd, then the display case. Her terror morphed into humiliated rage. Her shrine, her name, publicly desecrated. "What have you done?" she hissed, striding toward the case, her voice trembling with fury so intense it drained the air from the room. She wasn't looking at Mei, she was fixated on the chaotic letters, the ruin of her legacy. Wei moved, stepping gently but firmly between Lin and the case. "Get out of my way," she snarled, eyes still on the glass. "No," Wei said, his voice quiet but resolute. He waited until she reluctantly met his gaze. Then he gestured, not to the scrawled letters, but to the small, broken figure of her daughter on the floor. "Don't look at it as damage, Ms. Zhao," he said, his voice carrying a sad, steady authority. "Look at it as a translation." Lin stared, confusion and anger warring on her face. "She's showing you," Wei continued, his voice softening to a near whisper. "This is what it's like to be her. This is what she sees every time you put a book in front of her. It's not rebellion, it's a report, the only one she knew how to write." The words hung in the air, simple and devastating. He guided Lin's gaze from the vandalized glass to Mei, then back again, the chaos outside mirroring the chaos within. Lin looked at the frantic letters and, for the first time, didn't see defiance. She saw a desperate cry for help. She looked at her daughter, so small against the marble, and didn't see a defect. She saw a little girl who had tried to show her mother her world and, in her desperation, had shattered her own. The fury on Lin's face began to crumble. The anger drained, revealing not the bedrock of pride but a deep, hollow horror, the horror of truly understanding. The glass, covered in her daughter's chaotic language of pain, reflected Lin's own shattered soul. Her world, built on perfection, was a lie. Mei wasn't a flawed product, she was a child crying for help. And she'd been crying to the janitor because her own mother couldn't hear her. Slowly, hesitantly, Lin took a step toward the huddled figure. The teachers melted away, the world narrowing to the space between her and her daughter. Words of a CEO were useless here, so she said none. She knelt, her tailored suit wrinkling on the marble, lowering herself to Mei's level for the first time. "Mei," she whispered, her voice breaking, the name fragile on her lips. Mei flinched, curling tighter, bracing for the anger she expected. But it didn't come. She peeked through her hair and saw something new in her mother's eyes, not anger, not disappointment, but fear. And tears. Lin reached out a trembling hand, not to grab or pull, but to rest gently on Mei's back. Then, in the grand hall of the school bearing her name, before everyone, the Empress surrendered. She gathered her small, broken daughter into her arms, holding her not with control but with the desperate, protective embrace of a mother who had nearly lost what mattered most. Later that night, after Mei was safely asleep at home, tucked in with a tenderness she hadn't felt in years, Lin returned to the empty school. She found Wei in his small custodial office, preparing to leave. "How?" she asked, her voice low and raw. "How did you know? How did you understand what she was trying to say when all I saw was a mess?" Wei leaned against his locker, the day's weight heavy in his bones. "It wasn't me," he said softly. "It was my wife, Ling." He gestured to a faded photo on the corkboard, a smiling woman before a whiteboard. She was a special education teacher. She spent her life learning their language. He shared Ling's passion, her belief that every child was a genius in their own way. "She used to say a child's frustration is a signpost to a locked door," Wei said, his voice thick with memory. "Our job isn't to get angry at the door, it's to help them find the key." Lin listened, absorbing the quiet wisdom. "What do I do now?" she asked, a desperate plea. "Where do I begin?" The next few months were a quiet revolution. Guided by Dr. Kong, Lin dismantled the fortress. Ms. Huang was dismissed. High-pressure drills gave way to learning filled with color, texture, and sound. Lin learned patience, celebrated small victories, and began to see the world through May's eyes. And slowly, achingly, the wall between them began to come down. One sunny afternoon, Lin Zhao walked into the custodial office at Beihai Preparatory Academy and offered Wei a job. "I'm starting a foundation," she said, her voice clear and steady, free of its former cold edge. "I'm seeding it with $50 million. Its mission is to fund research and support families dealing with childhood learning disorders." She met his gaze directly. "I want to ensure no child ever feels broken for seeing the world differently. And I want you to run it." Wei was speechless. "Ms. Zhao, I'm a janitor." "No," she said, a faint smile on her lips. "You're the man who saved my daughter. You have a wisdom no university can teach. Your wife's work shouldn't have ended with her. This is a chance to build a legacy in her name." The Lingchen Foundation for Different Learners opened 6 months later. At the launch ceremony, Lin gave a speech, not as a CEO, but as a mother. She spoke of her own ignorance, May's courage, and the janitor who taught her the meaning of true strength. May sat in the front row, her eyes fixed lovingly on her mother. She held a special reader with a colored overlay, a tool that helped the letters stay still. As Lin spoke, May beamed, her confident, happy smile lighting up her face. Wei stood at the side of the room, introduced as the foundation's first executive director. He had spent years trying to be invisible, but a little girl's whispered plea had called him out of the shadows. He had lost his quiet life, but in its place, he found his voice. He had honored Ling. He had helped save a child. And in doing so, he had fixed the one thing that was truly broken, his belief that he was just a janitor. Reflection: what a journey. This story's power lies in its reminder that empathy and courage can bridge even the widest divides. It shows how a single act of kindness, Wei's stone, his drawings, can ripple outward, transforming lives. The lesson I'd carry is that everyone, no matter their role or status, has the power to make a difference by truly seeing and hearing another person. It's about recognizing the unique language of someone's struggle and responding with compassion, not judgment. If this story sparked something for you, what thought or lesson will you carry forward? I'd love to hear it. And I'm curious, where are you reading from? If you'd like to keep finding these sparks, more stories like this are waiting. Each one celebrates the resilience of the human spirit. Thank you for sharing this quiet moment. In a noisy world, it means everything. Until our paths cross again, be the main character in your own story, and be kind.